Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Newport. Right? This is episode 11, or kind of episode 1, season 2, sort of, but not really, but kind of. If that makes any sense, In this episode, we're starting on downtown, as the title and thumbnail very much suggest, and as I implied during the world tour, this is what we're working on now. Yay! I also implied that we would be filling in that central area that I showed, that I said you wouldn't guess what it is. We're not doing that, so I guess you still have time to guess if you want to. Again, I don't think you're gonna get it. I'm excited for it. That along with a couple other builds, I decided to move to next week's episode because I'm actually gonna talk a little bit about something. We're gonna bring some of that teaching moment back, kind of like the placemaking episode. Not all episodes are going to be like that, but occasionally I have a lot of fun making episodes where I can talk about nerdy stuff about cities, and so that's going to be a little bit involved with what I'm going to talk about, and it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to give it away because you're just going to have to come back and find out what it is if you really are curious. But I still love this episode. We still get a decent amount done. There's a lot of stuff I did behind the scenes that isn't even going to be in this video. Prep work, things like that for the future. A lot of road building. Not to mention, this last week has actually been decently busy for me. There's been a lot going on in my life, which is a good thing. It's been a good thing. Things are progressing for the future, but it also means it's harder to find time to just sit down and work on YouTube. And as much fun as I have doing this, and I really am excited by this city and I love working on it, there are times when I have to, talk to myself a little bit and be like, is it really worth it to sit down for hours on end? Or I say hours on end, for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I never play for very long when I play because I like to take breaks to do other things. It's not healthy to be sat down for that long, but it's hard when I have so much going on to convince myself that it's okay to just sit down and play Minecraft, even if it's for a video. Not to mention that I do have other things in my life that I like doing, so sometimes it's hard to find the motivation, but I've been working hard. I've been doing it. I've been pushing myself to get this out there because I do enjoy doing this, and I made a commitment for myself. Obviously if I disappear off the face of the earth, it's however many, like 30 people that might actually care, but I care more than anything. That's what's really important. I made a commitment to myself that I want to take this seriously and that I want to commit to this, so I am. So expect this for the foreseeable future, at least. Starting this episode, I wanted to do something a little bit fun. I thought about doing this before the world tour, but then I forgot to do it basically every episode. I thought of it beforehand. But I wanted to do something fun that you probably don't care about at all, but who knows, maybe someone will. I kind of want to recommend some media because I'm a very media heavy person, right? I watch a lot of movies, a lot of TV. I read a lot of books. I love consuming media. I don't know why. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Whenever I'm going on jogs and things, I've got music or a podcast or a movie playing on my on my phone or something, and I'm going out. Like when I'm playing Minecraft, I've got something in the background. Like when I was building some of these builds today, I was watching something, which is actually going to be what I recommend. I'm going to do a movie and a book today because reading is important. Not enough people, I think, in the modern age, especially in America, read. It's kind of depressing. Not enough of us read. Even I myself, there's been significant times in my own history where I look back and I'm ashamed to say I just hated reading. I didn't want to read. I didn't do enough of it, but it's a good thing to do, and you don't necessarily have to read high literature or anything like that. Just find something fun to read. Find something that you enjoy reading about and read. Even if it's like a news article, just read. It's good for you. It honestly is. It's really good for you. But moving on beside that, every episode I want to recommend a movie or TV show and a book. Something that I genuinely think has artistic and, I don't know, I guess just value. I want to recommend something that I actually believe people should consume, because while I do think that it's totally fine to consume popcorn media, which is just media that you consume for fun and not because there's any kind of deeper meaning or intellectual reason of watching it. It's just a fun film. There's plenty of movies like that I've myself seen. But it's also good to consume media that is going to provide a certain amount of intellectual value to your life. So today, I'm going to be recommending my movie that I watched while building some of these builds. Well, one of them is Arrival. Came out in 2016. Amazing film. It is a sci-fi film, which while I do love sci-fi, I will admit that it's not the first thing I think of when I think of intellectual or high art films. No offense to sci-fi films, but they just tend to be a little bit more just like kind of fun films. They don't tend to be more intellectual films, but Arrival very much is so. I love it dearly. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Ever since I watched it for the first time, I think about it all the time. Not really, but I do love it. It is an absolutely phenomenal film. It has phenomenal acting. All of the people involved should applaud themselves because they just did an amazing work. And the book that I'm recommending today, you're probably going to hear it and be like, oh, that's so boring. That's so typical, gross. But it is actually an enjoyable read. At least I think so. And that is The Odyssey. Now, if you somehow don't know what The Odyssey is, that's okay. I didn't for most of my life, to be fair. I read it in high school for the first time. It was something that we had to read for one of my literature classes. But I actually fell in love with it. I love it as a book. I loved studying it. I loved learning about the Greek society at the time. It was a lot of fun. The Odyssey, of course, again, if you aren't aware, is the story about Odysseus traveling home after the Trojan War and everything that ensues with his son and his wife and back home and all these suitors going after his wife because basically they think he's dead. But the point is, it's actually an enjoyable read if you're willing to get past the fact that, it's classical literature. It is very much so like a thinky book in a sense, but it's also a fun adventure. Like it is a Greek story. It's a fun adventure with a lot of things that happen. I enjoyed reading it. I know plenty of people that actually vastly preferred the Iliad and Aeneid. I think the Iliad's okay, not gonna lie. I'm not a huge fan of the Aeneid. I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of boring. I vastly preferred the Odyssey. Don't know why. I couldn't give you any specific reasons off the top of my head, but I just really enjoyed reading it. So that's my recommendation. So every episode from now on, if I can remember, which hopefully I will, we'll see. I want to recommend, like I said, a movie or TV show and a book, right? They're just things that I think you should think about consuming in a sense, because I genuinely think it is going to have a good impact on society if more people read and watch these things. Now, that isn't to say that I'm going to be upset if your response to hearing about me talking about the Odyssey is, I'm bored, I don't want to listen to this anymore. I get it. There is a natural stigma to these things, and plenty of people just don't enjoy reading Greek literature. That's totally fair. It's Greek literature. It's not American literature, and you don't have to feel bad about not liking it. That's one thing I really hate about a lot of people who teach literature courses is that they tend to, because I remember my early years in high school, we would read a lot of literature that I absolutely hated, Moby Dick being one of them. I genuinely think Moby Dick is a terrible book, and anyone who says otherwise is a weirdo and doesn't know what they're talking about. So I remember my class, we talked about how important it is for American culture and all this stuff. And the entire time I'm thinking, like, it's only important for American culture because they force everyone to read it in high school. But it's the most boring, dull, awful, stupid novel I think I've ever read. It is so incredibly boring. It's awful. I hate it. It's a terrible, terrible book. I think we tend to bloat some of these things and think writers are so amazing simply because they wrote this or whatever, and we continue to further this notion that they're amazing even though they just no longer are, in a sense, relevant to modern society. And I think my ultimate point from this is that there probably is someone who will read Moby Dick and enjoy it. I don't know who that would be, but I'm sure there's someone. And ultimately, that's your prerogative. I think literature is written primarily for its own time and place and culture, and that doesn't always stick around, especially when you go to really ancient culture, right? The Odyssey was written in the classical era of Greece. That is an incredibly different culture to the modern one, if you weren't aware, So it is perfectly reasonable that someone of the modern times wouldn't enjoy reading it because it's not made for us. It's not written for us. It wasn't even written in English, right? It was written in Greek for the Greeks of the time. So to them, it probably was an amazing read. Who knows? Maybe they hated it too. Maybe it was like it was their version of Moby Dick where everyone had to read it, but no one loved it. I guess we'll never know, But ultimately the point is it wasn't made for us. Now, I genuinely do enjoy it personally, but if you don't, that's fine, right? You don't need to feel bad or feel like there's something wrong with you for not being able to appreciate literature, because not all literature is made for everyone. Like I said, literature is made for its time, for its culture, to be applicable then. There are a few writers that I would argue are a little bit more timeless, right? And tend to be more applicable to the modern age, even after all this time. Namely Jane Austen. A lot of her work is still relevant, it's still funny, it's still topical today because she's not making commentary on a specific social structure or a specific part of her culture. Rather, she's making a commentary on society in general or humanity, which is something that really hasn't changed that much. She's making commentary on human beings and their impulses. That's very relatable even now. That hasn't changed much since the time that she wrote her stories in, which is why I think so many people today still love Pride and Prejudice. They still love Persuasion. They still love Sense and Sensibility. They still love Emma. And all of these books, they're very funny, and we still find them funny because the jokes are about humanity and not specific culture. Whereas I think of, if I remember correctly, they found like a piece of pottery which had like a joke on it, like a bar joke in Greece. And I can't remember exactly what the joke is, partly because it's just not funny, right? I'm sure you can look it up and you can look up the joke. It won't make any sense to you because it's only relevant to a Greek person of that culture. I mean, think about if you had to explain a modern joke to an ancient Greek. Half of them, they probably wouldn't laugh. You might laugh completely and utterly and say, this is the most hilarious thing I've ever heard, but they don't have no idea what you're talking about, because it's a completely different culture. But anyways, I've been rambling way too long about media and stuff. I promise not to do that every episode. Unless you really like it. I don't know. I love talking about literature and media in general. I think there's a lot to talk about. In our world. I think, I have a lot of opinions I'm willing to share if people want to listen, I guess. But I also understand not wanting to listen, That's just, I understand the territory. But I hope you enjoy watching the rest of the episode. coming back at the end here just to say goodbye. Ended up talking way more about literature and the importance of literature this episode than I did about the actual build. Mainly because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, you know. I built some buildings in downtown, although I feel like every episode's been kind of self-explanatory, but I have enjoyed building it, and I hope you have enjoyed watching me build it. I hope you've been enjoying these episodes. And I'll say it again. I'm trying to say it every episode. If you have any suggestions or questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment and, you know, ask away. For the most part, I'm probably willing to answer, you know. I'm willing to interact and comment back and, you know, take feedback for these suggestions. Feedback is incredibly important. I did take some art classes in college, and I remember one of the things that was very emphasized, like my first semester in college when I was taking these classes, one of the things that was emphasized is the importance of having the ability to take constructive criticism and to not become too attached to your art or, you know, whatever it is. Because when you become too attached, then you're not willing to allow it to change and get better. As soon as you recognize immediately that whatever you do is inherently flawed and can always improve, you are going to improve, right? But if you think that what you did is the best thing ever and that you can't do any better than that, then you're only going to go downhill from there, right? Because if that's the best thing you ever did, you're never going to get any better. You know, it's like what they say, the first step to healing is to admitting that you're sick, in a sense, right? And that's true for whatever it is you're doing. But that aside, I really do hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope to see you next time. Please do think about liking if you liked the video and subscribing if you want to see more. Maybe YouTube will suggest it, maybe it won't. I don't know. I'm not YouTube. We'll see. And I'll see you next week. I hope you have a good one. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.